This is the Persons of Interest podcast, diving into careers, personal stories, life lessons, and more, featuring interviews with interesting people doing interesting things. And now, here's your host, Derrick Dockett.
Thank you for downloading a special edition of the Persons of Interest podcast. I've got some eager people ready to talk in this episode. At least one eager bear. For those that are in the Springfield area, you are probably very well aware of the recent stories that Wyatt Wheeler, the Springfield News Leader, put out regarding Missouri State men's basketball team being snubbed in the NCAA tournament. I've been wanting to do a sort of Bears basketball type of podcast for a while, focused podcast for a while. And this is sort of the trial run for me because that topic is one that is probably near and dear, or maybe not dear. That's probably the wrong words to use, but it's one that stands out in history with us because of the circumstances. So I wanted to give this a shot. I've got three other guys with me on this podcast. I'll let them introduce themselves. One you may very, very well know, but all of us have affinities for Missouri State and the Bears basketball program. You all know I've told it my background. I'm going to leave myself out. I've mentioned in many of my past episodes, talking with Missouri State folks, sports folks all over as a graduate and working at the Missouri Valley Conference, even though I wasn't working at the Valley during this time period, just a regular old fan like I am now. But I'll let Kevin Agee go first. Introduce yourself. You're a native Springfieldian, I know, but you've got definitely a unique look into Bears basketball. But tell the folks about yourself. And you've been a podcast guest too.
I have, yeah. I really enjoyed the podcast that we did talking about some about Missouri State, actually. So I'm a lifelong Springfield resident, and there was never any doubt in my mind that I was going to attend Missouri State because I really grew up on Bears and Lady Bears basketball. And, a big reason for that, of course, was Cheryl Burnett and Mary Jo Lynn would just send free tickets, just stacks and stacks of free tickets into our elementary school. So that was a great kind of gateway for me to get to know the university and get to know the athletics program. And I love Missouri State. I love Missouri State basketball. It will be a part of my life forever. And, that's why I've worked at the university. I have 2 degrees from the university. And it's just been a really, really wonderful place for me to really call home.
Cool. Kevin Grogan, I'll let you go next.
Great. Yeah. Long time listener, first time participant on the podcast. Yeah. It's good to be here. So yeah, my background with Missouri State, I attended beginning in the fall of 2002. Grew up in St. Louis, grew up in the Oakville area, so same high school as Bear Keith Pickens. For those that are Bears fans listening to this. So yeah, this period that we talked about, or going to be talking about in terms of the period where we had the 21 RPI snub was right in and around the time that I was attending school down at Missouri State, and now I'm living back in St. Louis now again, but have continued to pay close attention to Bears athletics for basically the last 20 plus years now.
Cool. All right. And our next guest, who's just chomping at the bit to talk, here's your chance, Mr. Shavies.
Anthony Shavies, Bears guard from 2003 through 2005. Came in as a junior college transfer. I was a part of the recruiting class. That was Blake Ahern, Devin Mitchell, Tyler Chaney, Jeremy Nicholson, Sky Frazier, Nate Blue. I've stayed here in Springfield. I played a little bit of professional basketball, but have been in Springfield basically since I graduated. Still really close to the program. I'm a Bear through and through. I have a bear head tattooed on me. Like, I'm a Bear for life. I'm still really close with a lot of guys, even some of the guys that I didn't play with. As Kevin mentioned, like Keith Pickens is still one of my very good friends, as well as Kyle Weems. You know, Spencer Laurie's daughter plays basketball with my daughter. Dale Lamberth and Deke Thompson are two of my best friends in the world. So I love the Bears, man. I love these Bears to death.
All right, 2005-06 Missouri State team. Wyatt Wheeler, I mentioned he did the story called Snubbed. There's a 7-part series in Newsleader. But I guess we'll start here. My origination, Kevin, you mentioned getting tickets from elementary school. That's how you fell in love with Missouri State basketball, men's and women's. For me, I had no idea. I was going to this school and didn't even properly make the SOAR visit, and just went down there, and the Friday before school started, got moved into the dorms, took placement tests, and I will never forget this, that I had a student in one of my gen ed classes that invited me to go to a Lady Bears game, and said, "Hey, you want to go to a basketball game?" I was like, "Sure, love basketball." Had no idea that we were in Division I. Just was like looking for something to do. Fell in love with the Lady Bears, and had a great time, and was looking forward to going to more games. It was fantastic. Fell in love with the program, fell in love with the Valley, and really loved watching. So I guess I just sort of locked in because, A, it was great basketball to watch. At that time, man, Hammond Student Center was like so much fun. Nothing against JQH Arena, but for those that have not been able to watch a game in Hammond Student Center, I'm sure we all have our own memories of that. Man, just unique. And I never experienced Spoon's Temple of Doom in that era, but some games against Creighton and Wichita State and Northern Iowa in Hammond Student Center, there was nothing like it with those fans sitting right on top of you, yelling any and everything to get the team going. So, but the Valley in those years really got going. We're talking multiple bids and everything, and it was high water mark, and that season was a high water mark. When the Bears went to the Sweet 16 in 1999, that was my sophomore year. Steve Alford quickly, after that run, took his job at Iowa, and the coaching search was on. It was a little bit of a hot mess, I guess it's safe to say, looking back at it now. But Barry Henson becomes the new man in charge, and that's where we'll jump in there. So I loved him. Barry was quite the character. I think people have their own thoughts about his coaching acumen, but he was just a great fit for Springfield, I thought. And looking back on it, I still believe he was a great fit for Springfield. He still loves that area. I guess, Kevin Agee, I'll start with you. That era of basketball for you, what stands out the most? I know there are lots of memories for me. The win over Mizzou 1998 is one big thing. So many great games. I don't know. I love the comeback win against Southern Illinois in the Valley Tournament. I think actually Anthony was on that team in 2000. It might have been 5. I'm not sure, 4 or 5. There was one where they didn't lead in the tournament until I think probably a minute or two left in the game, and eliminated Southern Illinois from March Madness. But Kevin Agee, I guess for you, Bears memories that stand out from that time period leading into 2005, 2006?
I think it was always something that would happen in the Valley tournament up at Arch Madness. Those are always going to be probably the most prominent memories for me, other than things like, attending a game for my birthday and getting to sit, practically courtside at Hammond Student Center, which for me at the time, it, would have been like the equivalent of sitting courtside at Staples Center. in LA. You know, it was that was a big thing. So I have those memories with my friends, and I think the things that happened at Arch Madness that were good, you know, the stuff that kind of preceded the heartbreak sometimes are the most prominent things I remember. They had a game that they played against Southern Illinois. And of course, those games in St. Louis against SIU, Bears Salukis were just unbelievably fun, and they were physical and they were close. And there was a 1 year that SIU took a massive lead into the second half. I want to say it was at least 20 points. And Barry's guys came back and won that game. And it was so exciting and thrilling to watch on, you know, from Springfield on TV. And that's what I remember a lot about those Bears teams. There was no quit in those teams in the early to mid 2000s. They would not relent. And I think that was a reflection of Barry. So just overall, just a lot of fun, physical, high quality basketball that our guys played, and they won a lot of those games too.
Yeah. What about you, Kevin? Grogan? I had to figure out a way to saying Kevin and Kevin, but
so from that period, I definitely reflect back on the good times and the not so good times of those, you know, call it three or four years. So on the positive side, definitely remember that game against SIU in St. Louis where the Bears made a huge comeback. And what I remember from attending in person was, well, a few different things. One, my father is an SIU alum, so that, you know, always was a pretty big rivalry in the house once I attended Missouri State. And then my younger brother also attended Missouri State as well. So I remember, you know, watching that game in person and having at halftime, it was a huge lead. I can't remember, it was 20 points, but it was at least 18, 19 point lead for SIU at the half. Having a bunch of SIU fans make a big deal about going out to the box office to buy their tickets for the next day at halftime, basically thinking that the game was over. And of course, everything spun around in the second half. And those same people were then coming to sell their tickets, which was just a fantastic experience attending live, seeing that turnaround over the course of basically an hour of actual time in the second half was great to watch. Also remember just some crazy, heartbreaking losses over that 3 or 4 year stretch, kind of beginning with the double overtime in the Missouri Valley final against Northern Iowa. That one definitely stands out. You also had we lost in some last second shots, and even one shot that happened after the buzzer expired against St. Louis as well, due to a clock malfunction at the Enterprise Center that wasn't synced up with the TV stream. And then there was also a game at SIU that I attended where we lost on a banked in 3-pointer at the buzzer by Josh Warren of all people. Just some crazy games in that 3 or 4 year stretch. And also I think speaks to just how strong the Valley was over that time frame, where you legitimately had called 3 to 5, depending upon the year, 3 to 5 tournament quality teams in the conference, basically for every year, or at least 3 of those years over that stretch of time.
I love that you guys have such a just rock solid memory of that era. I guess some of these things are hard to get out of your mind. I'm now having flashbacks to the Northern Iowa double overtime game as well. I remember not as a student, I had already graduated, but sitting in the student section for that one at then Scott Trade, now Enterprise Center or Savage Center.
I would come in during you talking about that game. That's a heartbreaking game. You know, I think about that game every day. Every day. It's that one that kills me. And it was the one the following year against Creighton. But that Northern Iowa game, I just remember it felt so many times in that game like we're going to win and then we're not going to win. And it was just so back and forth. I remember, they had a play where it was right underneath the basket. They get an offensive rebound and they have a putback and they end up blowing it. And then we get a chance. We're down on the other end. I remember the play that I fouled out. I ended up turning it over. They're on the fast break and I take a foul to save a layup and didn't realize it was my fifth foul. And I think about that one like all the time. And then the next year against Creighton in the finals, and this is one I love Coach Henson, the coach. Just let me preface that by saying I love Coach Henson for who he is as a person. He's a really, really good dude. There was a couple of things I felt like he could have did differently in that game. And going into it, going into that part of the year, he had felt like the zone was kind of our secret weapon and it had been working for us. And if you remember, we had played Southern Illinois, I think it was maybe the game before, got down like 23 points, went to a zone, and they basically shot themselves out of it. I mean, Tatum missed just about every shot that he took in that second half against that zone, and they allowed us to get back into the game. We end up winning it. Now, you figure you're playing against Creighton. You know what they do. You probably don't want to play a zone against them, right? But their thinking was, it's our third game. It's the third day of the tournament. We got tired legs. And Anthony Shavies and his ego was like, listen, put me on Nate Funk. I'm going to shut him down like I did the two previous games that we played against them. And we're going to beat them again for the third time this year, But they felt like the zone, the coaching staff felt like the zone was the better option. So I remember one of the very first plays of the game, we're in the zone. They get low on the shot clock. McKinney throws up a shot. It goes in. Boom, from three. The next play, again, late in the shot clock, one of their other guys gets it, throws up a prayer at the end, three-pointer goes in. Now, at that point, as a coach, I'm like, all right, I'm getting out of this zone. We're going to go back to doing what we do, which is man-to-man defense. We're better at it than just about anybody else in the country. We got the guys to guard their best players, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to live and die on what we do. But we sat in that zone, and I tell you, Coach Altman, they scouted that zone really well because they just put Funk right in the middle of it, and they threw it to him every time, and they shredded that zone. They ate us up. And so I think about that game just about every day as well, because it's just like, Coach, get us out of this damn zone. Get us out of it, and we'd be playing in the tournament.
Yeah. Us as fans, you just heard us tell some stories about, some of our memories. I don't think, and I keep telling myself this different perspective of the years that I worked in the Valley, and I think about my first year, which was 2010-11, the years that the Bears won the regular season, and then they lost in the tournament final to Indiana State. As a player, like as a fan, the heartbreak that we experienced, I can't imagine what it compares to the heartbreak as a player, because I know every kid that gets to play college basketball, your dream is, you want to win a championship, but making the NCAA tournament is just one of those ultimate goals. And here you are talking about, man, get us out of that zone and we'd be in the tournament. Can you just put some words to it of, as a player, just so fans understand how much it eats you up when things don't go the right way? It's just like, not that, I think I would love to have listeners understand that players care as much as they do, and it's not just that they're going through the motions.
Oh, yeah. So I think this generation doesn't identify with college basketball the way our generation.
Sure.
Because, guys stuck around longer, but college basketball was a deal, and we didn't have social media, so you didn't have the highlights. So you had to watch the games. So I remember, I watched every single NCAA tournament from the time that I could remember watching TV. I remember watching Arkansas go on their run. I remember watching UNLV. I remember watching Duke. I remember all these teams. And the thing about the NCAA tournament that was so special for me was every year when the tournament started, you know, Pizza Hut would do their promotion and they would have the basketball, right? So every year my dad would bring home that Pizza Hut NCAA tournament basketball for. So it was basically my dream since I was a kid that like, hey, one year my dad's going to bring home that basketball and it's going to be because I'm in the tournament. And that stuck with me. You know, that was one of the things that I talked to Coach Henson about on my visit, was just that, hey, I'm coming here because I believe we have a chance to go to the tournament. I believe that I can contribute to this team in a way that will get us to the NCAA tournament. So that was like a huge deal. And I'm from California, so my parents obviously didn't come to see a lot of games, but they always made sure that they came to the tournament. So my dad was in the stands. And, you know, it's crazy. You hear 13,000 screaming people, and I could hear Charles Shavies talking to me during the game. You know what I mean? And so, like, not being able to get that done still eats at me today, because it's something that, like, no matter what I do, no matter what I accomplish from here on out, I'll never play in the NCAA tournament. You know, and that was such a huge deal for me. And part of it was just like that moment with me and my dad and us bonding over him bringing me that basketball every year, me wanting to accomplish that, you know, like get that done for us, really. You know what I mean? And I've accomplished a lot in my basketball career. I won 2 championships overseas, 2 finals MVPs. Like, I've done a lot, but never played in the NCAA tournament game. And I felt like I had 2 chances that were right there. Like right there in my grips, and they just like slipped out of your hands. I mean, double overtime against Northern Iowa, like we should have won that game. We for sure should have won that game. And then that Creighton game, I just really feel like, for lack of better terms, like I just feel like Coach blew it. He blew it. And there was that, the zone thing was one thing, but there were other things too during that game. And I won't get like all into the weeds of it, but I remember me and Deke Thompson. Deke's one of my best friends. In fact, I coach his son now in AAU, which is really cool. But, you know, in the first half, he was 5 for 5 and I was 4 for 5. And all of a sudden we're sitting on the bench in the first half next to each other. And we're both looking at each other like, what are you doing over here? And he's looking at me like, what are you doing over here? Like we're cooking. We're cooking. Let's ride it. Let's ride this thing out. You know, like, again, I just go back to like my experiences as a coach. And, you know, if I got 2 guys that are, you know, a combined 9 for 10, they for sure aren't sitting on the bench. Like this could be the last game of the year. Like, no time to save these dudes now. They got all week next week to rest. And, you know, we're 21, 22-year-old kids. Like, I could have played 40 minutes if he needed me to. So there's no reason like I wasn't in foul trouble or anything, but it's just things like that I still think about to this day. You know what I mean? And I was so close to playing in the NCAA tournament.
Yep, that 2005-6 team was also so close with the 21 RPI. You mentioned Deke Thompson, so had to go back and do a quick little bit of research. Just to jog everyone's memory, the roster of that team: Blake Ahern, Deke Thompson, Nathan Ballou, Kellen Easley, Tyler Chaney, Dale Lamberth, Sky Frazier, Shane Laurie, Drew Richards, Cal Rosh, and Justin Fiermeyer. So Deke played 30 games that year. Blake played all 31 games and started all 31 games. So, you know, those guys were workhorses. The schedule that year, I guess, I'm not going to go through everything, but of note, of course, in the regular season, the Bears played Northern Illinois, Arkansas State, Georgia Southern, A&M, Corpus Christi, Oral Roberts, which has been a long time regional rivalry there, Detroit, Arkansas. And notable about that Arkansas game, at Arkansas, that team, 2005-6, they only lost that game by 4 points. It was a 79-75 final. Arkansas State, Then you get into Valley play. Start out with a loss to Creighton, won 3 in a row, beating Indiana State, winning at Drake at Evansville. Lost to Northern Iowa. And then we get a win at Illinois State, a loss at Wichita State, win at Southern. I guess I am going through the schedule. Lost 2 losses in a row versus Wichita at home, at Bradley a loss. They win 3 in a row. They win at Indiana State. They beat Drake and Bradley at home, a loss to Southern. Then they beat a 25th ranked Northern Iowa on the road. They win at Evansville. They win bracket buster against Milwaukee. They win at Illinois State. They win at Creighton. So talk about going on a hot streak to wrap out the regular season. Then we get to Arch Madness 2006, and boy, something just didn't click against Northern Iowa, and they lost 57-42 Northern Iowa. And that's where we find them on Selection Sunday sitting with a 21 RPI. So to lay the landscape of the rest of the Valley that year as well, a very strong league. We've talked about this ad nauseum, that the Valley sort of, everyone says, game the system. You had teams that were ranked and the top half of that league beating up on each other. So what happens, then you're getting chances for quality games. That's what that system was then. When your league can schedule the right way to get games to win, and you then get into conference play, that's how the big boys are. That's where the Big Ten, the ACC, they're playing conference games in season against each other, and they're all ranked opponents. That's what happened, and that's what happened with the Valley that year. I don't know. I'm now remembering that selection show, which is also posted online. But I guess I'll go back to Kevin. This time, Kevin Grogan. That season, you both, Kevin's amazing how much memory you have with Bears basketball. Sometimes better than mine. But that season, 5-6, anything stand out to you? A game, player, decision that sort of you think that might have changed it, or that might have changed, taking out the Northern Iowa game, taking out the conference tournament, but anything for you that stands out?
So for me, no specific games. Maybe this is, not the best mindset, but I still think back to a lot of the commentary on that selection show, whether it was from Billy Packer, friend of Billy Packer, or others who just, again, to your point, made it seem like it was ridiculous that the Valley had as many teams, or maybe even more teams than the ACC that year. And again, I think it would have been totally justifiable for us to get 5 teams in that season. And I think that was borne out by the tournament results, where you get 4 teams in and 2 of the 4 make the Sweet 16 out of that group, number 1. And number 2, it wasn't just RPI that rated the Bears highly. It was other computer ranking systems as well. So you could say, and I think there are good reasons to say why the RPI is a flawed system, but like KenPom is one that's still really well respected. And the Bears were almost as highly rated in that system as they were in the RPI that season. So it was pretty absurd that they were left out. And there was a lot of commentary in Wyatt's articles from members of that selection committee who kind of went back and said, we probably messed that up. So I think less about specific games than I do just kind of holding on to bitterness that we were left out kind of unjustifiably that year is more what I think about from that season.
That's a good way of looking at it. I think I live in the moment of looking back, and the selection committee member that said, that was just a mistake. That was the one thing that stuck to me. It's just like, hey, I appreciate that person's candor, whoever that is. Because, now with the way things are in this world, you don't get that often. But again, it's also easy to admit a mistake years after it's been done. But again, a mistake is a mistake. So Kevin, Kevin Agee, it looks like you might be doing some research. Are you pulling up something that stands out? What are you thinking about there?
Yeah, I'm pulling up some details on the schedule, because I don't remember game by game from that season, and also 2005, 2006, and 2006, 2007 really kind of run together for me. So I was just looking at the schedule to say, okay, which year was it we had the clock malfunction in St. Louis? And that turned out to be 6-7, I think.
Yeah.
So like there were a lot of things that happened along the way, but just to kind of jog my memory, I was looking here at our schedule for the 2005-2006 year, which I believe was the 21 RPI.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Because otherwise we'll get this mixed up. We've had, as a program, a lot of really, really close calls at Arkansas.
Yeah.
At least 2 or 3 that I can remember. And this year was no exception. December 15th, 2005, playing at Arkansas, a really, really good Arkansas team, as they've typically been. And that was another game. We were down 44-31 at halftime and ended up losing 79-75. So we outscored them by 9 in the second half. And I remember that game as if we could pull this off, we could come back and win this one. And now, all these years later, looking back on a game like that and just wondering, gosh, what if we could have found another 5 points one way or the other and you beat Arkansas? Okay, well, then you're probably definitely going to make the tournament. So that game is one, now that I look at it, that I remember. And then the other thing is, I know how subjective the process can be for at-large bids and choosing who's going to get into the NCAA tournament. I'd forgotten that we had 3 teams finishing 12-6 that year, maybe more. I'm going to try to pull up the standings.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, we had Wichita State at 14-4. The Bears, Creighton, and Southern were all 12-6. Northern Iowa was 11-7. Bradley 11-7. Bradley got into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was going with this.
Yeah,
and I don't want to just completely leave Creighton out of the discussion because they were also 12-6.
Exactly. Yep.
But one of the things that I never ever understood is, how is it possible, just for the purposes of this podcast, talking about Missouri State's fate in that season, how is it possible that you finish above Bradley in the standings in your own conference and they're the ones that get the final bid? And I think that kind of gets to, Derrick, what you might have been saying about it was just hard to hear people on TV just saying, well, it's too many teams. We're not going to put 5 in from the Valley. We're just not.
Yeah.
Because you're just the Valley, and we have to reserve those spots for, to put it not so eloquently, the cash cows. So
yeah,
those are the politics that go into it. But I think that Arkansas game is one of the several that I remember from being a fan of this program, where you just go, God, we almost had them. Yeah. And if you're able to come back and win that game, who knows?
For reference,
and that
Arkansas
was still not a bad loss.
Correct. No, it wasn't.
Correct.
It wasn't. Absolutely not. It was a good loss.
Arkansas finished 22-10.
And really, you look at that schedule for that team, they don't have a bad loss. I mean, Bradley, maybe, but Bradley ends up going to the Sweet 16, but they lose to Arkansas, Creighton, Northern Iowa, Wichita State, Bradley, Southern Illinois, and Northern Iowa. Those are the only losses that year, and eventually they lose to Louisville. But there's not a bad loss on there.
Yeah.
Those are all like losses that if you're going to lose, those are the teams that you want to lose. Like, they didn't lose to Indiana State at home or, any of those teams. Like, they all of those losses were good losses. And I think they proved well even in the NIT. They ended up beating Stanford, and Stanford and Houston, and then eventually losing to Louisville. But it stinks.
So Arkansas finishing 22-10. They were third in the SEC West that season. They were an NCAA tournament team. They got an 8 seed. Fun facts for no one tell. They lost that dreaded 8-9 game, but any guesses on who they lost to without looking it up?
I'm not sure I even want to know.
Bucknell. So it's just like a team. If you saw Bucknell on the Bears schedule, we might say, "Oh, okay, they can beat them.
They can win that game."
Yeah. And then guess how many points they lost to them by? 4. It was 59-55. So it was a close game, just like the Bears played a close game at Arkansas. Yeah. Also for reference, so we're going through the conference standings that year. Wichita State won the regular season title at 14-4. They were a tournament team. The Bears were 12-6. The Creighton was 12-6. Southern Illinois won Arch Madness. They were 12-6. They were a tournament team. Northern Iowa, they were a tournament team at 11-7, and Bradley was a tournament team at 11-7. So it's also kind of
didn't lose to any teams that didn't go to the tournament.
There you go. That's why I brought that back up, because kind of a weird year for the Valley that year as well, where there was no, like, you typically find like this top tier, middle tier, bottom tier. After the 11-7 with Bradley, Drake and Evansville were both 5-13, and Indiana State and Illinois State were 4-14. So you don't find that 500-ish team in the middle. It was, boy, you got teams beating up on each other. You got these teams that are just like hanging on for life, and they're just beating each other up, getting their wins by playing each other. So it's just these two divisions of teams. So it was a very unique year for the Valley as well. Anthony, we said that you maintain a close relationship with the program, and that's just a couple years out from when you had just been removed from the team. Yeah. And are you overseas at this point in 2005?
Yeah. So this is my first year overseas, but at that point you're still pretty much on the team for all intents and purposes.
Okay.
Like, I'm talking to those guys every single day. Deke Thompson is my best friend, so we're talking daily. I'm still talking to Blake basically every day. Dale Lamberth, I was talking to him every day. So it was a tough deal to go through. And it's a really weird deal after you graduate, because it's almost like when you break up with your girlfriend, you don't want her to do better. You know what I mean? So it's almost like, a part of me was like, oh, I hope they don't go to the tournament. It's like just like 0.5% of me, but like 99.5 wanted them to go to the tournament. So it is weird in that way, but it was really disappointing for those guys and the coaching staff, and just knowing how hard everybody had worked. And I actually think that was Coach Henson's best team.
Yeah.
During his tenure, I think that his recruiting classes had kind of come together and they had put their stamp on the program. I think even from the assistant coaches that he had brought in, like, I felt like the mix had finally got to a place where he wanted it to be. And, what more could they do? I mean.
I think we lost him again. I was going to say, as he mentioned recruiting, for folks that haven't listened to Anthony's podcast with me, it's a great story to hear, because we mentioned that he's from California. I encourage everyone to go back, and I'll link it in the episode notes, just how his recruiting process was. He was pretty candid about how and why and the fit in Springfield. So definitely would encourage folks to go back and listen to his story about landing at Missouri State. So we've gone about 40 minutes. There's one thing I wanted to get questions for all three of you. I'll start with Kevin Agee on this one. The selection show. Typically, that's like always must-watch TV for me. As a college basketball is my favorite sport. After that, baseball. But baseball doesn't have, like, outside of the World Series, there's nothing that I'm like, oh, this is the thing that I am sitting down to watch and I cannot be interrupted. That's what the selection show always is for me, even when Missouri State's not involved, because you just always want to know who's in the tournament. That year was just like on another level, because it's like, okay, my gosh, we have a chance. This is the year since 1999. And, you know, I was kicking myself for not following. One of my closest friends followed the Lady Bears on their trek to Piscataway, New Jersey. He didn't go to Washington, but then out of a sudden, they're playing in the Final Four, and the Final Four is in St. Louis, and he went. So I was kicking myself for, like, I live in St. Louis. Why did I not go to the Lady Bears Final Four? I was ready for it. I'm like, okay, I think I might actually try and go if the Bears play in a game that's close. And I'm sitting there and I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting, and wow. And I didn't even know this, because I didn't, you know, at the time, they had the camera crew watching the Bears. Boy, did my heart sink. That's one feeling that I will never forget, outside of the feeling of 2010-11 when the Bears did not win the tournament, and Konzo, after the season, took the job to go to Tennessee. That was also another job that one, like, whoa, our coach is leaving? Like, we got something going. That was the other feeling I had, like, similar to that. Like, I just love Konzo Martin, still a huge Konzo Martin fan to this day. But that selection show just sucked the life out of me in a sports world. For you and Kevin, Grogan, I'll ask you the same thing, but just the selection show, a memory of that, or just a feeling of the result.
The worst memory from watching that was seeing Air Force come up on the screen.
Oh, yeah.
As being in. And I know more about sports and life in general, of course, all these years later. But even then, there was something about knowing that you're kind of like coming down to the end of how many spots are still open. And there was something so deflating about seeing Air Force up there and knowing a little bit about what their resume looked like. And that's not to take anything away from their student athletes or their coaches or their administrators who they didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
But I think that was one of the most painful things. I remember I got, I don't know, I mean, this was 2006. I don't know if it was a text or a phone call, something. But it was like immediately after I get a message somehow from my best friend, who's also a diehard Missouri State basketball fan. And it was like, he was like, I don't think we're going to get in, after we saw Air Force made the field. So I felt pretty hopeful on Selection Sunday up until that point. But it was deflating on a sort of a broader, more universal feeling too, in that sometimes it's like it really, really hurts when your best isn't good enough, especially in sports. And so that's, like Anthony was talking about how he thinks about that Northern Iowa game frequently.
Yeah.
Just from things he would change. And just for me as a fan, I didn't have any direct control over the situation or anything other than just providing my support. But my heart just broke for everybody in the program as soon as we all knew that it just wasn't going to happen. And so then you start thinking, okay, what can we change? What can we do better? And I think one of the pieces of feedback that I've heard anecdotally is the committee essentially said, well, was your schedule? Your schedule wasn't good enough. And then the next year in 2006, 2007, Barry and his staff did a really great job of, I think, beefing up the schedule. And that was the year that they played that neutral site game and beat Wisconsin, who was, I believe, at least a top 15 ranked program, if not
number 7,
top 10 program. They were number 7.
Yep.
And we beat them. And that was the year with I believe, a 34
Yeah, the second.
Something like that.
Yeah, 34. Was it 34, 30s? 31, something like that. Yeah.
31, 34 RPI. And then it's a moving target.
Yeah.
At least it was back then. I'm not entirely sure now that the target hasn't been removed entirely. It's like they're no longer just moving the target, making it harder for small, mid majors to make the field as an at-large. But if like 1 year it's your schedule, and then the next year it's, you didn't perform as well in your conference. So all of those things are just really, really frustrating as I look back on that era of Bears basketball that, in my opinion, should have had at least 2 opportunities to play in the NCAA tournament just on the merits of what they accomplished, the wins, the losses, and everything.
What about you, Kevin? Not number 2, but other Kevin.
So, yeah, I mean, nothing additional really from the selection show, except to say, once you saw Air Force come up, you kind of knew, once you saw Air Force and a combination of all the other Valley and larges, you kind of knew that it was done at that point. And so, yeah, I mean, I was, really irritated at the time. Probably, again, when you're younger, I feel like you attach more importance to these things, and then you probably should, for someone who didn't put in the work that the coaches and players did for that season. But yeah, the other thing that I sort of thought about at the time and still think about now was you could essentially make an argument that basically 4 seasons in a row, the Bears were 1 win away from making the tournament all 4 years.
That's a good point.
So, the 03-04 double overtime loss to Northern Iowa, you win that game, you're in automatically. Yeah. Next year, we lose in the conference final again to Creighton. You win that, you're in automatically. Year 3, which is the year with a 21 RPI, if we beat Northern Iowa, I don't think there's any way Northern Iowa gets in ahead of us. We would have beaten them 2 out of 3 times. At that point, the end would have finished ahead of them in the conference standings. And then the following year, again, that was probably a little more borderline. Maybe we were 2 wins away that year. But even that year, if we beat Creighton in the conference semis that season, and let's say we go on to lose to SIU in the conference final, people forget that SIU was a fantastic team that year. They were, I think,
highly ranked.
Fourth, maybe ranked like top 15 in the country.
Bingo.
So there would have been no shame in losing to SIU in the conference final. And I think we probably get in that year if we just beat Creighton in the semis. So basically for that whole, like that Ahern and Ballou Cheney class, all 4 years, I would argue they were probably 1 win away from the tournament for all 4 years. And then who knows what the subsequent years look like from a Missouri State basketball, but honestly, Missouri State athletics more generally.
Yes.
Coming out of that, if you get 1 or 2 wins out of those 4 games.
Yeah, the trajectory of the program, potentially the athletic department, shifts. And we've seen what the NCAA tournament in turn does to not only basketball programs, but universities as a whole with, the impact it has on visibility and then enrollment and things like that. So I feel like I need to end this on a positive note. It's been such a downer, but I'm curious. We've been talking so much about that era, 2005, 6 and things like that. But just in general, your favorite era of Bears basketball. I know for me, it's an easy one. It stands out. It was just so fun to watch that 2010-11 team go on to win the regular season. That team didn't make the tournament, but they just rose to the occasion game after game against the top tier of the Valley and found themselves at the top of the Valley for a change. And that game against Wichita State at home, I was lucky enough, it was my first year working in the Valley. I'm lucky enough sitting courtside with the ESPN crew working stats on the headset. And just, I've never seen JQH Arena at that much of a frenzy. I was there for the first game against Arkansas, and it was certainly a buzz in the building when that building opened up. And they opened up with the win against Arkansas. But that team, we knew it was rebuilding. Konzo Martin was starting a project there. And in 3 years, he turned that thing around to get a Valley tournament or a Valley regular season championship banner hung for the program. But man, something like that Wichita State game is one that I won't forget. And Nafis Ricks and those guys standing on the scores table with the crowd on the floor. There's not a whole lot of crowd or floor rushing moments that the fans have had, but that one stands out for me. I might be stealing the thunder from you guys, but maybe you have a different one that stands out for different reasons. So I don't know. Either one of you guys want to jump in if you have one?
Yeah, I'll jump in first on this one because I think, Derrick, you provided a nice segue for me because it's my favorite game outside of that 4 to 5 year era that we've been mostly discussing here today was another game against Wichita State. And that game happened in 2009, 2010, the year before the championship year. And that would have been Conzo's second season.
Yeah.
And what I liked about that team was I think it's fun as a sports fan when you're starting to see it come together. Like, it's not the finished product yet. That team in 2009, 2010, that was Adam Leonard's first year. That was Northeast Rix's first year. That would have been Kyle Weems' third year in the program, but second year active since he redshirted that first year. They played their home game against Wichita State in 2009, 2010, for me, showed what was coming. And they just needed a little bit more time to get there. That was another game where Wichita just flat out smoked them in the first half. It was non-competitive. I think it was probably 40-20 or something like that at home. And that was really discouraging. But here came the Bears in the second half, and they almost came back and beat them. And I thought that was so thrilling, even though it ended in a loss, because, people stuck around. They didn't leave. Crowd was still there. And I think I'm looking at the box score now. That game ended up 65-62 after being after trailing 37-18 at the half.
Yeah.
For me, that was sort of a big moment. The guys on the team, the coaching staff may feel differently, but for me as a fan, what I saw that day was so wonderful because it really sort of was the prelude to a team that was starting to bond and gel and would go on to win the championship the very next year. I love these games where there were comebacks, and that team really, really bonded. I think in that first year they all got to be together, and then that led to a championship the next season.
Yeah. And let's not forget that was a really talented Wichita State team as well. So that comeback is one that definitely should stand out. And thank you for bringing it up because it's not one that I remember, but when you bring up the line score, I'm like, wow, they outscored them 44-28 in the second half. So Wichita had to be definitely on edge in that second half of that ball game there. But that roster of JT Durley, Graham Hatch, Trey Merlin, that was a very good Wichita State team. Garrett Stutz, who was not even a starter at that point. That team would eventually go on, win an NIT championship. Then, of course, we know they just start their run of to the Final Four in 2013 and just, took off. So, yeah, no, that's a good point because sometimes it's not always the wins that matter. It's seeing the vision and seeing things come together that progress until the wins as well. So, good call. Good call. Kevin, Grogan?
Yeah, for me, and again, it's weird that we're all reminiscing on the close calls of those like 03 to 06, 07 type teams. But for whatever reason, I have a fondness for those teams. I think part of it is, it's a few different things. One, the Valley's never been stronger than it was like those 3 or 4 years. And I think would love for it to get back to that level, but I just don't think that's likely to happen again, where you had Wichita, Creighton, and those types of schools that were consistently excellent in those years. And so that was the level of basketball, I think, was just super, super high those years. And so that's one thing I'm nostalgic for. The other thing is just how long those players stuck around. So like those Bears teams were, You, of course, had really important junior college transfer pieces like Anthony, like Deke Thompson, Dale Lambert, I think, came in as a sophomore. But the kind of core of those teams was like a Devin Mitchell, Ballou, Cheney, Ahern, of course, Drew Richards, guys who came in basically as freshmen and stayed all 4 years. And again, that's not something that I expect we'll ever see again. So you kind of got to build and watch players develop over a period of 4 years in most of those cases, or in Devin's case, 5 years, I think, because he missed a year with injury. So you got to see guys get better over time. And so I really liked that era of Bears basketball, again, due to the continuity and just the level of the teams. And again, that was true not just of the Bears, but other teams too. You got to see, Nate Funk or whoever it might be, Jamal Tatum, Randall Falker is a good example of a guy who got much, much better over the course of his career as a Saluki, and watch all these guys kind of develop over a period of 3 or 4 years.
Definitely a hallmark of that era of Missouri Valley Conference basketball, the guys that stuck around, those, especially the guards, and we all know about guard play in the Valley. It can make or break you, and you have a leader on the floor that can see the floor the right way. Those guys that stuck around for 3 or 4 years, and one of those things that made Southern Illinois in that era so successful, because they had talented guards and they had NCAA tournament experience year after year after year, and they just kept getting it done. So, yep, definitely one of those things that you saw the success when you could have the kids stick around in a program. That's something we don't get anymore now in this era of name, image, and likeness, and the transfer portal and everything else. So I'm definitely appreciative of what we're able to experience, wins and losses. So another good call there. So Anthony had some technical difficulties, so we appreciate him for hopping on. But I'll let you guys last thoughts to close it out. For me, again, that era with the heartbreak, the passion, I think, is one thing that we all can agree on. It's one reason why we just can't quit this program, regardless of, having degrees from it. That's one part of it, but we want the success. I think, like, as a Cardinal fan in St. Louis, I don't take for granted, especially in a year like this year in 2023, that they're struggling and they're terrible, and it seems that they've given up here in late August. You want to be there for the moment when they do have the point when they reach the mountaintop, and you want to be there and enjoy that ride with them. So I think it's going to happen, and I definitely have not given. I'm always a glass half full kind of guy, because everyone gets a shot. I really do truly feel that everyone gets a shot. Could it be this year? Who knows? I don't know. The Valley's a unique, different place now. This team this year, most of the guys coming back. Some guys in other league teams have departed and graduated. So could it be an opportunity? Who knows? I think, and Kevin, you may have said this before, I've seen on social media or in other places, but at this point, and I don't want to make this sound negative, but boy, put yourself in position to have a really good weekend in St. Louis, and let's just get the job done there, maybe. I want there to be a really good regular season, but I also understand that college basketball is a different place, is a different, landscape now. But if that's the easiest path to playing in March, so be it. And if Coach Dana Ford can have this team playing their best basketball the first weekend in March in St. Louis, so be it, and get the job done that way. But hey, if that means you can win all your non-conference games and be a top 2 team in the Missouri Valley Conference, and maybe your power computer ranking of choice is where it needs to be, so be it. So I'm still hopeful. I still am glass half full for the program and the team. And I truly do feel that they will get there sooner rather than later. Maybe naive of me to have that thought, but that's just where I am, because I understand, after sitting in a room with coaches and things like that now, knowing that their job is it's different nowadays with the way the landscape is. So I'll leave it at that. If you guys have parting thoughts, I'll let you have it if you like.
Yeah, I'll go first on that one. I want to give a very, very special shout out and thanks to Dana Ford, because I think he has, grown as a coach, as a head coach of a mid-major program. It takes a lot of pride. It's like we take a lot of pride in Bears basketball here, and I think he really understands that, and I think he understands the importance of the tradition and the history of the program. And this is a challenging time to be a head coach of a Division I basketball program. It just is. And I think Dana has done an admirable job of kind of accepting the transfer portal for what it is. And sort of taking it, we're not going to complain about it. We're going to use it to the best of our ability. And I think he's done a marvelous job of adding players and replacing players when he's had to. And who knows if that's going to end in an NCAA tournament appearance. I sure hope it does. I hope it's this year. And I do think, like, for any mid-major program, your best shot is making sure that your roster is as deep and talented as it can possibly be. And then when it comes, late February, early March, you just hope that you're healthy and you've got enough depth on that bench to go win 3 or 4 games in consecutive days and not leave it up to fate. And then that is much easier said than done. But for all the times that Missouri State has been in that Valley title game, it feels like it's been at least 12 times over the course of my life. Eventually you're going to win it. If you get back there enough times, eventually you're going to win it. Dana has gotten them to the semis, and I 100% believe he can lead them to a championship and a tournament appearance. And I can tell you, wherever they are, wherever they end up going, when it happens and they're in the NCAA tournament, I will be there in person. And I'm going to, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to enjoy it. I will enjoy it because I think we've all seen getting to the NCAA tournament is not something to take for granted, because you just don't know when you're going to be able to get back. Yep. So I'm looking at it from an optimistic perspective, and it's the start of the school year, and I can't wait to see what Missouri State Athletics has in store for us.
Well said, sir. Well said. I've also made that same commitment. Two commitments, actually. If the Bears are playing on Sunday at Arch Madness, I'm there. And wherever they're going, the NCAA tournament, I'm going. Like, sending my job an email, hey, I need some days off. I am going to X location for the NCAA tournament. I think my wife knows that too. These are 2 things I've lived and died with. So, Kevin G, you want to take time to wrap us up?
Sure thing. So I think we're looking kind of prospectively from here regarding Bears basketball, and specifically about Coach Ford. I think to the point that the other Kevin made just a second ago, I do think the best you can hope for is putting yourself in contention every year, right? And I think he's done that. I think his worst conference record has been 9-9, which of course is not a terrible record at all. Has never had a losing record in the Valley, and more often than not is finishing called second, third in the Valley. It has been super competitive. For within the Valley, it has been right there in those conference semifinals. Again, kind of harkening back to some of the heartbreaks from the mid 2000s. I think we've lost to Derrick in the semifinals by a combined 3 points in back-to-back years, something along those lines. So those Mosley Prim teams were basically right there in terms of making it to the conference finals. And I think the one of the really positive aspects in terms of Coach Ford is just the recruiting. We consistently get really, really good players in, and that I think alone, puts you in contention year in, year out. And so again, like others have mentioned, we'll definitely look forward to the day of attending the Bears return to the NCAA tournament. I've been a fan, as I mentioned, since I started attending in the fall of 2002. So it's been more than 20 years. I've been a fan of a team that hasn't made the tournament. And my wife jokes that if you want to find, for all the ladies out there who are listening to this podcast, if you want to find a man who will stake baseball, you look for a man who roots for a team that doesn't win. It keeps rooting for them anyway. And so that's definitely the situation that the three or four of us find ourselves in on this podcast, is rooting for teams that are, at least the Bears basketball, have not necessarily provided as much success as we would have hoped for over the past 20 years.
There you go. Another well said statement. It's a good way to wrap it up. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to chat about this. This has been fun. Something I've been wanting to do for a while. Apologies to the listeners that Anthony's not able to wrap up with us, but I was grateful to have him hop on for a bit and share some insight from a player's perspective, specifically that era, and just his connection to the program as well. Appreciate you guys so much for doing this. This has been great. I don't know, it might lead to me doing something that's a little bit more Bears basketball specific in nature. I don't know. We'll see what happens. So especially if they go on a run, if they do make that tournament run, then I had no choice, right?
Yeah, I hope that happens. I hope they make the decision for you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So I appreciate you guys for downloading this special edition of Persons of Interest, the Bears Basketball Roundtable. Thanks again to my guests, Kevin Agee, Kevin Grogan, and Anthony Shavies, former Bear Anthony Shavies. Appreciate you guys for listening, and have a good day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Persons of Interest. This podcast is a personal project with the goal of sharing stories that might inspire others to create their own path. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a guest suggestion, you can reach Derrick on social media at @DDocket. Thank you for listening to Persons of Interest.